Let's say that you have a scene you're working on and one of your characters requires glowing eyes. Well, don't worry, today I'm going to show you exactly how to do that with VFX. Who are you talking to? I'm talking to the camera. I'm trying to shoot a YouTube video. Can you go away, please? And make sure that you stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to give you a tip that's drastically going to change the way that you do this effect. It's a tip that took me way too long to figure out and something that I see a lot of people doing wrong, including myself in the past. So anyway, here's how you do the effect. Okay, so I'm going to be using Adobe After Effects to do this. You can do this in a lot of other compositing software, but this is my preferred method. Now, the first thing we need to do is to track the actual eyeballs themselves. There's two ways to do this. There's the simpler way, which you might do when your eyeballs aren't moving too much. Maybe your character isn't moving back and forward from the camera very much. And there's a more effective way for when your character is moving a bit back and forth from the camera and maybe your eyeballs are changing size a little bit, which is planar tracking. I'm going to show you how to do an object track first, which is something I cover in a lot of my other tutorials. So we right click, new, null object, and this is just something that we can paste our tracking information onto. We're going to click on our footage, right click, track and stabilize, track motion. Then we're going to zoom in, scroll this to an eyeball. We want to make the search area a little bit larger. So if this goes out of frame, it still can find it, and make our target about the size of our eyeball and track forward. Once you're happy with it, make sure that your target is the null object we created. Click OK, click apply. Okay, there's all our tracking data. You'll see that this rectangle sticks to our eyeball. Now, if we have any object that we parent to this null object, it should track on there pretty nicely. But I have a preferred method of tracking, which is a lot more effective and efficient that sometimes object tracking alone can't handle. What we're going to do instead is right click, new, solid. I'm just going to name this track. We're going to hide this layer for a second. Click on our footage, animation, track in Boris FX Mocha. Now this should come with After Effects. We're going to open Mocha. We're going to pick this magnifying glass, zoom into one of our eyeballs, click the spline tool, and we're going to draw a shape around our eyeball. And this is going to give us a lot more reliable track. We don't have to worry about the size of the object or warping. It's going to handle it. This is what I like to have checked. I'm not going to worry about perspective. Track forward. And you can see it can handle the shape of our eye a lot more better than just a normal object track would. I've been saying object tracked, I should probably be saying motion track. You can see I'm moving away from the camera and it's still tracking it relatively well. And when it comes off, just click OK. And that's our first eye done. So we're going to click save, close Mocha. I'm going to click on our footage, tracking data, create tracking data, layer 1, OK. Change this, corner pin support motion below. Now our layer we're going to export to is our track that we created here. We're going to apply export. You can see it sticks nicely. Now we're going to do the same thing for our other eye. We're going to create a new solid. I'm just going to name it track 2. You could name it left or right, but I'm not going to do that. Open Mocha. You can delete this so you don't get confused. Go back to where you want to begin your track. Zoom in and do the same thing. Now your track might change shapes a little bit, but that's okay. We're going to fix this with masks. For any other effect, this might be a problem and we could solve that by keyframing the actual track itself, but I'm not going to confuse you today. Let's just stick to the basics. Now notice how I'm moving away from the camera and it's still tracking my eyeball pretty nicely. That's why I prefer this over just a motion track. Almost all the way out of frame, we still have a perfect track. Let's stop it there. Save. And do the same thing. Create track data, layer 2, okay. Support motion blur, and we're going to change this to track 2. Apply export. Now I'm going to rename them so I don't get confused. This is my left eye. This is my right eye. Now here comes the fun part. Let's actually make our eyeball glow. I'm going to start with my right eye. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, create a new adjustment layer. I'm going to turn it off for now. I'm going to click G for the pen tool, or you can come up here and click it. I'm going to zoom all the way in. I'm going to turn the exposure up so I can see my eye a bit better. Don't worry, this doesn't affect your footage. It's just for the viewport. I'm going to make a rough outline around my eyeball. If I click and hold, it's going to create these curves instead of just jagged edges. So let's do that. Let's drag our mouse so it's nice and curved. Click and hold, click and drag. And we have our first eyeball. Very important. Click M and make a keyframe for your mask. Do that now before you forget later. We're going to parent this to our right eyeball. We're going to turn the adjustment layer back on. Now let's add some color. I'm going to change the viewport back to 0. I'm going to add a curves. I'm using Video Copilot's effects toolbar. Alternatively, you can go effect, color correction, curves. It's just a lot easier to hit Control Spacebar and type in curves. Now, if you want your eyeball to glow, we have the RGB channel. We're going to click about here and drag it up a little bit until there's a bit more brightness. Now, the color that you want, I'm going to go for blue, turn that up a bit, and I'm going to mess with the green and red a little bit just to make a bit more light blue. Now, that already looks all right. We're going to scroll back in, click on our adjustment layer, F, give it a little bit of a feather. And here's where most people would stop. But remember I told you I'm going to give you one tip that's going to take it a whole nother step further. If we zoom back in, we click on our adjustment layer and we double click this little mask icon. It reveals this. Mask expansion. I'm going to put this in a negative value a little bit till we bring back a bit of that black rim around my eye. And if I click Ctrl-Shift-H to hide the mask and I zoom out a little bit, what a difference that makes just having that black rim around my eyeball again. Now we can feather this out a bit more, maybe change this to about 6. And look at that. That looks great already. Most people forget about this black rim. Let's make it a little bit more pronounced, -5 maybe. That looks great. And that's where a lot of people go wrong with this effect. I used to do it way too much. I forgot about that little black rim. We can take this a step further. It just depends on the effect you're going for. If you want to have the pupil visible, what we can do is click on our layer, turn it off for now, bring the brightness all the way back up again until we can see our pupil. It's a little bit more easy to see if you don't have dark colored eyes.
My blue-eyed audience right now. Who even are you? Well, I'm not you.
And we're just going to draw a rough little circle around where we'd like the pupil to be. Turn this back on, turn this back down. Now change our new mask to a subtract value and feather it out a little bit, preferably the same value as your first one. And now your pupil's back in the shot. Again, you can turn the expansion up a little bit to make it a bit bigger or down, depending on the size you want it. And if you want it to glow a bit more, RGB, turn the brightness up. And that is basically how you do the effect. One last important thing, make sure that there's mask path turned on for both of your masks and scrub through your timeline and just adjust them if they go off a little bit. It's good practice to do it every few seconds. Mine is tracking pretty well, but I think once we get towards the end, it's going to start looking off a little bit. So we're going to go to 6. Yep, here we go. It's come off a little bit. Turn that mask off and make sure it sticks to the outline of your pupil or your eyeball, your iris, whatever it's called. We can double click our whole mask and drag the whole thing. If it all comes off a little bit, now go in between our keyframes, check that they're fine. Take as much time as you need refining this process, but I'm pretty happy with how that looks. Let's hide that mask and play it back. I'm not sure how much this helps with adjustment layers, but it's always good practice for me just to enable motion blur for the layer. And there we go. And that's pretty much how you do the effect. Now just take everything that you've learned and apply it to the other eyeball. Let's do this quickly. And if it looks a little bit uncanny, it's probably because your pupils don't match. Try and make sure that they're looking in the same place. That's a little better. Remember, if it looks uncanny, it's probably because of the pupils. Now, if you want to make the eyes a little bit brighter, just duplicate each of the adjustment layers with Ctrl D. Now look at that, more of a supernatural brightness. So there you go. There's how to change the color of your eye. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.